Hello, my friend. Today I will tell you another long-forgotten legend. Close your eyes and let the magic transport you to Middle-earth. Our journey begins.
The wind that swept across the lonely mountain carried with it the scent of the forges, iron and smoke, gold and fire. Deep within the mountain halls of Erebor, the hammers of the dwarves rang with pride once more. Since the fall of Smaug and the battle of the 5 armies, years of labor had restored the kingdom under the mountain to its ancient glory. The great halls were carved anew, the treasure hoards counted and secured, and the sound of laughter had returned to the stone corridors. King Dain Ironfoot, strong and steadfast, ruled with a sure hand. Under his command, trade with Dale and the Iron Hills flourished, and the dwarves of Erebor grew rich once more. Yet even in such days of prosperity, whispers moved through the lower halls like cold drafts. Whispers of strange shapes glimpsed beyond the eastern slopes, and of shadows that lengthened though the sun shone bright. It was in these days that the tale of the 9 hammers began. Long ago, in the elder years of Durin's folk, there were forged 9 hammers of great power and craft. They were wrought in Khazad-dûm during the reign of Durin IV, each blessed by the king's hand and given to his master smiths. With them, the dwarves built wonders beyond counting, gates that could not be broken, blades that never dulled, and gems so cunningly cut they seemed to breathe light. But in the ruin of Khazad-dûm, the hammers were lost, scattered, and broken. Only fragments were recovered through the long years. When Erebor was restored, the 9 hammers were reforged from those remnants, symbols of unity, labor, and the unbroken strength of Durin's line. They were guarded closely, each borne by a chosen smith of the King's Guild, for they were said to hold a secret known only to the kings of old. Then came the day when all 9 bearers were lost. They had been sent eastward to Dale, bearing gifts of craft for the men of Bard's line, but they never arrived. Messengers returned empty-handed, saying only that the road near the running river lay silent, and the marks of a battle had been found upon the stones. When word reached King Dain, the forges of Erebor fell quiet. To lose 9 of his finest craftsmen was grief enough, but to lose the hammers, relics of Durin's glory, was a wound to the very heart of his kingdom. In the king's hall beneath the mountain, a council was called. Balin, the white-bearded counselor, stood at Dain's right hand. "If foes have dared strike upon our roads," he said, "then it is not mere brigands we face. These were no smiths without defense. They bore arms, and their hammers were not for shaping gold alone. There is darker work afoot." Dwalin, broad-shouldered and scarred from the wars, struck his gauntlet upon the table. "Give me leave, my king, and I will find the truth of it. No shadow, east or west, shall hide the thieves from Dwalin's eyes." But Dain looked not to his old warriors, but to a younger dwarf standing near the rear of the chamber. His name was Frar, son of Fundin, a miner by trade, known for his courage and steady wit. "You have the eyes of one who listens before he speaks," said Dain. "Go with Balin and Dwalin and seek the trail of the 9 hammers. Bring word of what you find, or bring them home." Frar bowed low, though his heart pounded like a drum. He had never been named to such a quest before. Yet he saw in the king's eyes the weight of sorrow and duty, and he vowed to bear it as a son of Erebor should. That very night the company gathered. There were 7 in all: Balin, Dwalin, Frar, and 4 others. Toli, a stone hewer of grim humor, Bruni the smith, Lofar the tracker, and Narvi, youngest among them, who carried the maps. They armed themselves lightly, for speed was needed, and they bore torches that could burn through the mountain winds. As dawn touched the eastern slopes, they passed through the great gate of Erebor. The guards saluted, and the sound of their boots echoed into the deep. Behind them the mountain gleamed gold beneath the rising sun. Ahead, the road bent eastward toward Dale, winding through fields where autumn leaves lay like embers scattered across the plain. They marched in silence for a time until Balin spoke. Strange tidings these. The roads to Dale have been safe for years. Not since the shadow fell on Dol Guldur have we had need to fear. Shadows may sleep, said Dwalin grimly, but they do not die. I have heard tell from traders out of the south that Easterlings move again in the east. Perhaps they hunger for gold. Gold is not all they might seek, murmured Frar, glancing eastward where the hills met the haze. The hammers were more than treasure. If word of their power reached unfriendly ears. Balin nodded. Aye, there are those who still remember the dark years when Sauron's servants learned craft at the hands of corrupted dwarves. I would not see such work rise again. They reached the valley of the river, running by midday, and found the place where the trail should have turned toward Dale. But there the ground was torn and blackened. The grass was trampled flat, the earth gouged by fire and blade. Dwalin crouched beside a shattered helm and ran his fingers over the scorched metal. Dwarven work, he said softly. This belonged to Oyin's line. He fought here. Frar knelt beside him, studying the stones. The battle was swift. They were taken by surprise. See here, the tracks lead east, not to Dale. Balin's eyes narrowed. Eastward. That is toward the desolation of Smaug, where few dare tread. But Lofar, who had been silent till now, rose and pointed with his staff. Look there, upon the rock. Some mark burned deep. They gathered close. Upon a flat stone lay a black sigil carved and seared by fire. It was a hammer crossed with a serpent's coil, and beneath it a single rune, cruel and sharp as broken glass. Balin's face grew pale. That mark, he whispered, I have seen before in the ruins of Dol Guldur. It is the sign of the Morgul smiths. The company fell silent. Even the wind seemed to still. Then Dwalin rose, his eyes blazing. So be it. If the servants of darkness have dared to touch our kin and our craft, then we shall hunt them to the last stone. Gather your gear, we follow the trail. And thus began the trail of the 9 hammers, a journey that would carry them far beyond the known roads into the deep places of Middle-earth, where shadow still clung to the bones of the world. The morning after they found the mark upon the stone, the company set out eastward, following the faint trail of the 9 smiths. The road grew rough as they went, winding through dry ravines where the wind moaned like a distant horn. Once, this had been Smaug's domain, the wasted lands that men still called the Desolation. Grass and green had yet to reclaim it fully. Ash lay beneath the soil, and black rocks jutted up like the bones of some great creature long dead. Balin led the way with his lantern held high, its flames steady despite the wind. Dwalin followed close, his axe slung across his back, his eyes ever scanning the ridges. Frar walked beside him, silent but watchful. His heart beat fast, for though he had known the safety of stone halls and deep tunnels, the wild lands were strange to him. Here the sky felt vast and empty, and every whisper of wind seemed to hide unseen watchers. By noon, they came upon a place where the ground sloped downward into a narrow vale. At its center ran a trickling stream, clear as glass, and beside it rose a pile of stone, unnaturally shaped, like a cairn, but built by no careful hand. The dwarves halted. "There was battle here," said Dwalin. He pointed to the stones. "See the black soot between them. A fire burned beneath that pile." Frar crouched, brushing away ash and grit. His eyes widened. "Bones," he said softly. "Dwarven bones." The others gathered round in grim silence. The cairn held fragments of mail and broken tools. Among them lay a shard of steel stamped with the mark of Durin's crown. "Here lies one of the 9, Balin murmured. "But who set these stones? Not the enemy. They would have left naught but ruin." Toli, the stone hewer, examined the cairn's base. "These lower stones were laid by steady hands," he said. "Perhaps one survived long enough to give his kin a grave." They stood in mourning a while, then Balin spoke again. "Let us take his name back with us when the time comes. But for now, we must move on. The trail grows cold with each hour." They pressed on into the east, where the land began to rise again into low hills. The soil there was gray and stony, and the air grew heavy with the scent of iron. As dusk fell, they came upon a ring of standing stones, half buried in the dust of ages. The carvings upon them were worn, but Frar traced the runes and read aloud. "Here stood the house of Thrallin the Maker, who carved the first forge in these hills." Balin's eyes gleamed. "A forge of Thrallin's line? That is ancient work indeed. Few remember the name, but in old records it is written that Thrallin served under Durin's heirs in Khazad-dûm itself. This place was once a smith hall of our fathers." "Then we are on their path," said Dwalin. "Our kin must have sought shelter here when they fled their attackers." They entered the ring of stones, finding a stair cut into the earth beneath a great slab. The passage descended into darkness, cool and still. When their torches flared, the walls shone with veins of ore and faded carvings of hammers and anvils. Narvi the young mapmaker's voice echoed softly. "This place was abandoned long before Smaug's time. See how the dust lies undisturbed." "Not entirely," said Frar, pointing to the floor. In the dust were footprints, small, clawed, and many. "Goblin marks," Dwalin growled. "Old, but not old enough." They moved carefully through the halls, their torches throwing long shadows upon the walls. Soon they came to a vast chamber where a forge had once burned. Rusted tools lay scattered, and the anvil stood cracked in two. But at the far end of the chamber, the light of their torches revealed something stranger still. A great door sealed with black iron and etched with runes none of them knew. Balin approached it slowly. "These marks are not of dwarven make," he said. "They twist upon themselves like a serpent's coil. Beware touching them." Bruni the smith, curious and bold, stepped forward to study the runes. "Strange that such a door should stand within a hall of our fathers," he muttered. "Who would have wrought such craft?" Before anyone could stop him, he placed his hand upon the metal. A faint hiss sounded, and blue fire flared along the runes. Bruni cried out and stumbled back, clutching his hand, though no mark showed upon it. The blue fire guttered and died, leaving behind a chill that crept into their bones. "That was foolish," said Dwalin sternly. "This is no work of ours. Some shadow has claimed this place." As they turned to leave, Frar's keen eyes caught something glinting beneath the fallen tools. He lifted it carefully. a fragment of silver metal shaped like the head of a hammer. Upon it was inscribed the Rune of Barley, one of the 9 smiths. "The trail ends here," Frar said. "They came seeking refuge and found only darkness." Balin's brow furrowed deeply. "Then the rest may lie beyond that door, but we cannot force it, not with the craft we have." "Nor should we," said Tolly grimly. "Such doors are better left shut." They left the hall before night deepened and made camp among the standing stones above. The wind rose, whispering through the gaps, like voices speaking from the dark. No one slept easily. Frar lay awake, watching the stars, his thoughts heavy with questions. Who had built that black door? What power sealed it, and why? At dawn they set out again, following the stream that wound through the valley. By midday they found signs that the enemy had passed not long before. Broken branches, ashes still faintly warm, and boot prints in the mud. The trail led eastward toward the gray mountains that bordered the iron hills. As they climbed higher, the air grew colder, and mist gathered among the rocks. Strange echoes drifted from unseen ravines, clinks of metal, the rasp of chains, and once the faint ring of hammers striking stone. "Do you hear it?" Frar whispered. Balin nodded grimly. "Aye, the sound of forges, but no dwarf hammers those anvils." They quickened their pace, keeping low among the rocks. As night fell once more, they reached a ridge overlooking a wide gorge. Below in the shadows, fires glowed, rows of them burning in long trenches. Figures moved among them, short and broad, but not all dwarves. Some were taller, leaner, Easterlings clad in dark mail. "There lies our foe," Dwalin muttered. "They build a forge in secret, hidden from the eyes of Dale and Erebor alike." "And see there," whispered Frar, pointing to a structure at the gorge's heart. 9 pedestals of stone, and upon them the hammers of Durin. Balin's face hardened. "Then our path is clear. We must find a way down and learn what they intend. But tread softly, for this is a nest of foes, and the fire of darkness burns below." So the dwarves descended into the shadows, hearts steeled and weapons ready, not knowing that betrayal already stirred among them, and that before the next dawn, one of their own would vanish into the dark. The gorge was deep, carved by ages of wind and water, and the fires below threw a dull, red glow upon the rocks. Smoke drifted upward in pale threads, carrying the bitter scent of oil and molten metal. The dwarves moved like shadows, descending narrow paths where old stones crumbled beneath their boots. Frar led the way, light-footed for one of his kind, following the faint glimmer of torchlight below. Behind him came Dwalin, axe ready in hand, his eyes glinting in the half-light. Balin and the others followed in silence, each step measured, each breath held. The nearer they drew, the clearer grew the clang of forges, the sound of hammers striking in unnatural rhythm, harsh and joyless, like the beating of chains. When at last they reached the valley floor, they crouched behind a wall of broken rock. Before them stretched a grim sight, the remains of an old dwarven smelting yard now seized and defiled. Iron scaffolds rose like blackened ribs, and upon them labored figures, both dwarf and man. The Easterlings shouted orders in their coarse tongue, and among them moved dwarves in dark armor, their faces hidden behind veils of soot and shadow. "By Durin's beard," whispered Balin, "our kin are here, but not as we left them." "They are thralls," said Dwalin, anger heavy in his voice, "forced to labor for the enemy." "Not all forced," murmured Frar. "Look there." Near the great forge, upon a dais of stone, stood a figure robed in black and silver. His beard was short, his eyes sharp and cold, and on his hand gleamed a ring wrought of dark steel. Around him, the other smiths bowed, their faces filled with both fear and awe. "It cannot be," Balin breathed. "That is Orin Blackhand, once of Erebor's guild." Frar felt a chill creep along his spine. He remembered Orin's name from the tales told in the lower halls, a master craftsman proud beyond measure, banished years ago for hoarding secret designs meant for the king's vaults. Many had thought him dead, lost in the wilds beyond Dale. "He has turned traitor," said Dwalin, and gathered the 9 hammers to his cause. Balin's voice was low, grim as stone. He would seek to forge them anew, binding their strength with the black arts once taught by the servants of Dol Guldur. Such craft was forbidden for good reason. If he succeeds, he could raise weapons fit for the Dark Lord himself. They watched as Orin lifted one of the 9 hammers high. The metal of its head gleamed faintly blue, alive with a light that seemed to breathe. He struck upon the anvil, and the sound rang through the valley like a shuddering cry. The other 8 hammers answered their bearers, striking in unison. Sparks rose, red, gold, and sickly green. "The forging has begun," Balin said. "We cannot tarry. We must break their work before it is finished." "But how?" asked Narvi. "We are 7, and they are scores." Dwalin's eyes narrowed. "We shall not face them head on, not yet. Let them believe themselves unseen. We will strike when the time is ripe." They withdrew into the shadows, finding shelter within a hollow of stone near the upper path. There they whispered in hushed tones, planning their move. "We need to know where they keep the hammers when they rest," said Frar. "If we can seize even one, their work will falter." "I will go," offered Lofar. "My feet are light, and I can move unseen." So it was agreed. As night deepened, Lofar slipped away into the dark. The others waited, listening to the wind that sighed through the gorge. Hours passed, slow as stone weathering under rain. Then came a sound. Soft footsteps hurried, uneven. Frar rose, hope stirring. But the figure that stumbled into the hollow was not Lofar. It was Bruni, pale-faced and wide-eyed. "He's gone," Bruni gasped. "Lofar is gone. I followed his trail to the edge of the forges, but there was no sign of him, only blood upon the stones." Dwalin cursed softly. "They've found him." "No," said Frar, his voice tight. "Something else. Look at these." He held up a small pouch taken from Bruni's belt. Black dust and twisted shards of metal. "This is forge ash, mixed with something else. I have seen it once before in the mines beneath Erebor, where the rock itself bled poison. This place is not just a forge. It's alive with sorcery." Balin's brow darkened. "Then Orin works not alone. He has learned the crafts of the Morgul smiths. I feared as much." Before dawn they crept closer once more. The fires had burned low, and most of the laborers slept among the coals. Only a handful of guards remained, their eyes dull from weariness. The dwarves moved swiftly between the shadows, blades drawn. They reached the central dais where the 9 hammers rested upon a black anvil. Their gleam was dim now, like dying stars. Frar stepped forward to lift one, but the moment his hand touched the handle, a voice echoed from the darkness. "So," said the voice, low and cold, "the mountain sends its dogs to gnaw at my heels." Orin Blackhand stepped from the shadows, a cruel smile on his face. His armor shimmered with a dull sheen like forged night. In his hand he held a hammer whose head glowed faintly red. "Frar, son of Fundin," he said softly, "I know you. Your brother fell at Moria's gate, did he not? You have his eyes, honest but blind to the world's truth. The days of the old kings are over. The time of hidden crafts has come." "You shame the name of Durin," Dwalin growled. "Lay down your weapon and face justice." "Justice?" Orin laughed. "Justice is the forge, and I am the hammer." With that, he struck the ground, and flame burst forth in a ring around them. The dwarves leapt back as chains of molten metal snaked up from the earth, glowing like veins of fire. "Scatter!" Balin shouted. They broke apart, fighting through the confusion. Bruni and Narvi dragged Frar back as Dwalin met Orin's blow head-on, axe to hammer. Sparks flew, and the sound shook the valley. Balin's voice rose above the roar. "To the tunnels. Fall back." The company fled toward the cliffs, pursued by Easterlings roused from sleep. Arrows whistled through the dark. One struck Toli in the shoulder, but he pressed on, gritting his teeth. They reached the narrow path by dawn, bloodied and breathless. From below came the sound of Orin's laughter, cold and hollow. "Run, little brothers," he called. "You cannot unmake what has begun. The nine will sing again before the moon turns twice." Balin turned once more to look down upon the forge. The fires burned brighter now, though the dawn was rising. "He speaks true," he said. "We cannot face him alone. We must seek the Iron Hills and the aid of King Dain's kin. Only with their strength can we hope to stand." Frar wiped the soot from his face, his heart heavy but unbroken. "Then we go east still," he said, "for the hammers, for the fallen, and for the name of Durin." And so they climbed from the burning gorge, leaving behind the echo of their own hammers, drowned by the darker song below, a song that would soon awaken old evils, long thought, buried beneath stone and time. The climb from the gorge was cruel and steep, and dawn found the company huddled in a narrow cleft of rock, their breath misting in the chill air. The fires of the forge still glowed faintly below, a dull scar upon the land. Smoke drifted upward, smudging the pale sky. None spoke for a long while. The weight of failure lay heavy upon them. Balin's eyes were shadowed with worry. "We were lucky to escape with our lives," he said at last, "but luck will not win us this war. Orin knows we are here now. He will not rest until we are ashes beneath his forge." Dwalin leaned upon his axe, his face grim. "Then let him come. I have slain worse foes than turncoat smiths." "Not foes who wield the craft of Morgul," Balin replied. "You saw the flame that answered his hammer. That was no trick of mortal metal." Frar sat apart from the others, cleaning the edge of his short sword. The memory of Orin's laughter gnawed at him. He had seen pride and madness in the traitor's eyes, and something else, something ancient, like the echo of voices that did not belong to the world of the living. "The Black Forge lives," Frar said quietly. "It drinks fire not made by hand. I felt it when he struck the ground. The rock trembled like a beast, chained beneath the mountain." Balin nodded. "Aye. There are tales from the elder days of forges that were bound to the deep fires of the world, where shadowed spirits dwell. Few dared to make such pacts, for they burned both the maker and his work. Yet if Orin has found a way to master that power..." He left the thought unfinished. They rested briefly and tended their wounds. Toli's shoulder was bound, and though his face was pale, he bore it with stoic silence. When the sun climbed higher, they set out again, keeping to the high passes where the stone offered cover. Their road led eastward still, toward the distant iron hills, whose peaks gleamed faintly silver in the morning light. By midday they reached a plateau where a stream cut through the rock, cold and clean. They drank deeply, filling their flasks. Dwalin looked back toward the west, where Erebor's crown shimmered faintly through the haze. "We are far from home," he said. "Too far. If we fall here, none will know where we lie." Frar met his gaze. "Then we must not fall." The other smiled faintly at his resolve, and for a moment the shadow lifted, but the respite was short. That night, as they made camp beneath an overhang, a strange wind stirred the stones. It carried with it a faint ringing, like distant hammers on metal. Narvi, the mapmaker, looked up from the parchment spread across his knees. "Do you hear it again?" he whispered. "The sound from the gorge?" "Aye," said Balin, "but softer now, as though echoing through the earth." They listened, uneasy. The ringing rose and fell, mingled with what sounded like murmurs, voices too faint to understand. Then it ceased, and only the wind remained. Before dawn, Frar woke suddenly. The fire had burned low, and the air was bitter cold. He thought he had heard the footsteps beyond the rocks. He rose silently, drawing his blade. A shadow moved at the edge of sight, vanishing among the stones. "Who goes there?" he whispered. No answer came. He crept forward, the chill biting his face. Then a voice spoke behind him. "Easy, lad," came Dwalin's low growl. "You'll wake the others." Frar turned. "Something's out there," he said. It moved like no beast. Dwalin scanned the dark, his eyes narrow. "Then we'll find it." Together they circled the camp, searching the shadows. The moonlight gleamed upon the rocks, turning them pale as bones. Then Frar saw it, a glint of metal, half buried in the sand. He knelt and lifted it. It was a broken buckle, shaped in the likeness of a mountain crown, the mark of Erebor. "This belonged to one of the 9, he said. "They passed this way." "Or someone wearing their spoils," Dwalin muttered. When they returned to camp, Balin was awake and waiting. "What have you found?" Frar showed him the buckle. Balin turned it in his hands, his brow furrowed. "Aye, it is ours. But how did it come here, leagues from the forge? Perhaps one escaped Orin's hand." Tolly stirred the embers of the fire. "If one did, he may still live. Orin would not waste his captives lightly. He has use for skilled hands." "Then we follow this trail," Balin said. "If one of our kin lives, he may tell us how to end this evil." The next day they descended from the high ridges into a valley thick with mist. The air grew heavy with the scent of iron and damp stone. Great pillars rose from the ground, remnants of an age-old dwarven road, their carvings worn smooth by centuries. "Khazad Path," Balin said softly. "This was once the northern road to the Iron Hills. Few living remember it." They followed the half-buried stones until they came upon a cave mouth at the base of a ridge. Black smoke drifted from within, faint and thin. Dwalin gestured for silence and stepped inside. The others followed, weapons ready. The tunnel twisted deep into the rock. At its end, they found a chamber lit by a single lantern. A figure lay slumped beside the fire, an old dwarf, his beard singed and his clothes torn. He started as they entered, fear in his eyes. "Stay back," he rasped. "Who comes? Orin's men?" Balin knelt beside him. "Peace, brother. We are of Erebor. Tell us your name." The old dwarf peered at them, then sagged with relief. "Erebor. I know that name. I am Barley, last of the 9. Frar felt his heart tighten. "Then you live." "Live?" Barley laughed weakly. "Aye, if you call this living. The others are gone. Orin took them. He would not suffer me, for I defied him. He sought to bind the hammers with fire drawn from the deep flame, the same that burns beneath the roots of the world. I fled when his forge awoke, but his hounds hunted me to this place. Tell us, said Balin urgently. What does he forge? Barley's eyes gleamed in the lantern light, fever bright. He seeks to craft a 10th hammer, one to rule the others. He says it will awaken the hidden power within the 9, the secret once known only to Durin's kings. But the cost is ruin. He feeds his forge with the blood of his kin. I saw it, I saw. His voice faltered, and he sank back, trembling. Frar took his hand gently. Rest, brother. You are safe now. Barley's gaze met his. No one is safe while the deep flame burns. Orin has bound himself to it. Strike him down, and he will rise again so long as that fire endures. You must find the heart of the forge and quench it. Only then can the hammers be freed. His hand fell limp. The faint light faded from his eyes. Balin bowed his head. Another son of Durin lost. They buried Barley before the cave and raised a cairn of stones. As they stood in silence, the wind carried with it a distant sound, the clang of hammers, faint yet steady. He works even now, said Dwalin. Then we have little time. Frar looked toward the east, where the mist glowed faintly red with the reflection of unseen fires. Then let us go into the fire, he said, and end this work of darkness. And though their hearts were heavy, the company gathered their packs and turned once more toward the iron hills, where the shadow of Orin Blackhand grew deeper with every step they took. The road eastward wound through a barren land where few living things took root. The soil was gray, veined with black, and even the hardy mountain grasses grew thin and colorless. Overhead, clouds gathered like smoke, and thunder muttered far away among the peaks. Yet the company pressed on, their steps sure, their hearts set upon their purpose. For 3 days they traveled without sight of foe or friend. The trail left by Orin's forges grew colder, though the smell of burnt ore sometimes drifted faintly on the wind. On the 4th morning they reached a valley rimmed with jagged crags. From its depths rose a faint red glow, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth. There, said Dwalin, the mark of fire beneath stone. We draw near to the iron hills. Balin's eyes narrowed. Aye, but not the lands our kin once held. These are the eastern wastes, the forgotten forges of Thralin's folk. They were abandoned when the hills cracked with fire in the elder days. Few who entered since have returned. Frar looked upon the burning horizon and felt the weight of Barley's dying words. The deep flame burned still. By noon they came upon a chasm, wide and dark, spanned by a single bridge of black iron. The metal was old, its surface scored with strange runes that pulsed faintly when the light struck them. Below, a faint red shimmer hinted at rivers of molten rock far beneath the surface. Dwalin tested the bridge with a heavy step. It groaned, but held. We cross here, he said, one at a time. The company moved carefully, each dwarf gripping the railing as they went. The air above the chasm was thick with heat and the smell of brimstone. When Frar reached the far side, he turned to help Narvi across. But the young mapmaker paused midway, staring downward in terror. What is it? Frar called. Narvi's face was pale. Something moves below. A roar rose from the depths, and the bridge shuddered violently. Cracks raced along the metal, glowing red-hot. Dwalin seized Narvi's arm, dragging him forward as a jet of fire burst upward, licking the underside of the bridge. The dwarves leapt to safety just as the far end collapsed into the chasm with a deafening crash. "By Mahal," gasped Toli, clutching his wounded shoulder. "The mountain itself fights us." "No," said Balin grimly. "That was no natural flame. It was called forth." They pressed on, leaving the broken bridge behind. The path wound downward deeper into the hills until the air grew stifling and the light dim. Faint tremors shivered through the ground beneath their feet. At last they came upon a cavern whose walls glowed faintly red, lit by cracks in the stone where molten veins ran like blood. In its center stood an ancient forge, cold now, its anvil split, its bellows rotted. Yet upon the floor lay strange sigils, drawn in ash, and in the midst of them a circle of blackened hammers. Frar knelt beside them. "These are not of the 9, he said. "Their making is rougher." "Tests," Balin murmured. "He practices his craft upon lesser tools. The real work lies deeper still." As he spoke, a faint sound reached them, a rhythmic thudding echoing through the tunnels ahead. Dwalin raised a hand. "Marching," he said softly. "Many feet." The dwarves doused their torches and drew back into the shadows. Soon figures appeared in the passage, a file of Easterlings, clad in dull mail, their helms wrought in the shape of snarling beasts. At their head walked one of the dark dwarves, his face hidden beneath a soot-streaked mask. He bore a staff tipped with glowing metal. Balin watched them pass, his hand tightening on his sword. "Slaves," he whispered, "our kin, bound to Orin's will." When the enemy had gone, they followed at a distance, moving unseen through the side tunnels. The deeper they went, the stronger grew the red light, until it seemed the very air burned. The sound of hammers echoed all around now, and the heat was near unbearable. At last they emerged upon a ledge overlooking a vast hall, the heart of the Black Forge. The chamber was enormous, carved from the living rock and filled with fire. Great chains hung from the ceiling, hauling slabs of glowing metal between furnaces. At the center rose a towering pillar of molten stone bound with iron rings. Around it worked dozens of smiths, dwarves, men, and creatures that looked neither wholly one nor the other, and at the pillar's base stood Orin Blackhand. He was bareheaded now, his face streaked with soot and sweat. The red light flickered in his eyes like flame reflected in a mirror. Before him lay a great anvil, and upon it the beginnings of a weapon, a hammer larger than any dwarf could wield alone. "Look well, my brothers," Orin's voice carried through the hall. "This is the 10th. When its forging is complete, the 9 shall bow, and the deep fires shall answer to none but me. The age of kings is over, the smiths shall rule." A cheer rose from the slaves, hollow, fearful, compelled. Balin's jaw tightened. "He has bound their wills," he whispered. "Dark enchantment drives them." Dwalin's eyes burned with fury. "Then let us break their chains." But Balin shook his head. "Not yet. If we strike now, the deep flame itself may rise against us. We must find its heart, as Barley said, and quench it first. Otherwise, Orin cannot be slain." "How do we find it?" Frar asked. Balin pointed toward the pillar. "There! The fire he draws upon lies beneath that stone. The deep flame sleeps below, bound by runes. If we break the bindings, it will consume itself, and him with it." They withdrew to the shadows once more, planning their descent. It would not be easy. The forge was guarded on every side, but the dwarves were cunning in tunnels, and they knew the ways of stone better than any foe. Through narrow vents and forgotten passages, they crept, moving ever downward, The heat grew fierce, their beards damp with sweat. Once, a patrol passed within an arm's length of their hiding place, and Frar felt his heart pound like a drum, but they went unseen. At last they reached the base of the pillar. The stone there glowed white-hot, and strange symbols were carved deep into its surface, runes of binding and fire. Balin studied them, tracing their forms with his eyes. "These are twisted reflections of our own craft," he said. "I can unmake them, but it will take time." "Then do it," said Dwalin, and quickly. As Balin began his work, Frar stood guard with Toli and Narvi. The roar of the forges masked their whispers, but every moment felt like the edge of a blade. Sparks rained from above, and the sound of Orin's hammer rang ever louder. Then came a cry, a shout from one of the dark dwarves. A guard had seen them. "Too late," Dwalin growled. "Hold them off." The enemy surged forward, and the chamber filled with the clash of steel. Frar met the first blow with his shield, driving his sword through the attacker's mail. Toli swung his hammer, breaking another's helm. Narvi loosed a throwing axe that struck true. But more came pouring from the tunnels. "Balin!" Frar cried. "How much longer?" "Moments only!" Balin shouted, carving the last rune with his knife. "Hold them!" Orin's voice thundered across the hall. "You dare defy me again? Fools! You strike against the fire that forged your fathers." He raised the 10th hammer high, and flame burst from the pillar, washing across the hall. The dwarves staggered as the heat seared their skin. "Now, Balin!" Frar yelled. With a final stroke, Balin drove his blade into the heart rune. The carving flared bright, then shattered. A roar shook the mountain. The pillar cracked from base to crown, spilling molten fire like blood. Orin screamed, his body wreathed in flame. "No, you cannot unmake me. I am the forge eternal." The deep flame rose, writhing like a living thing, and engulfed him. His hammer fell, melting where it struck. The slaves cried out, their chains breaking as the enchantment shattered. "Run!" Balin shouted. "The forge is falling." They fled as the hall collapsed behind them, fire chasing their heels. The tunnels quaked, stones splitting, rivers of molten rock surging upward. Frar dragged Narvi clear as a beam fell, and Dwalin bore Balin upon his shoulder. At last they burst into the open air, tumbling onto the ash-strewn slope. Behind them, the mountain roared as the forge sank into ruin. A column of flame rose to the heavens, lighting the night like dawn. Then it faded, leaving only smoke and silence. For a long while, none spoke. At last, Frar said softly, "It is done." Balin nodded. "Aye, Orin's fire is quenched, and the 9 are freed." But Dwalin's gaze lingered on the burning horizon. "Yet shadows ever return," he said, "and there will come a day when the hammers ring again." Frar looked eastward, where the first pale light of morning touched the iron hills. "Then we will be there to answer them." And thus ended the forging of the 10th hammer and the long trail of the 9. But though the fires had been stilled, the memory of their song lingered still in the heart of every dwarf who heard it, the song of stone and flame, of pride and ruin, and of the courage that endures even when the light grows dim. For 3 days the company lingered upon the slopes of the ruined forge, tending their wounds and watching the smoke drift skyward like a banner of victory and mourning alike. The firestorm that had consumed Orin Blackhand and his corrupted works had reshaped the valley. Where once the Black Forge stood, there was now a wide, smoldering crater. its rim glowing faintly red even beneath the starlit sky. The air was thick with ash, yet within it there was a strange calm, as though the mountain itself sighed in weary relief after long torment. Balin sat upon a stone, his beard singed, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. In his hand he turned one of the 9 hammers. Recovered from the wreckage, its handle was scorched, but the head gleamed faintly still, bearing the mark of Durin's crown. He polished it with a corner of his cloak, and as he worked, his voice was quiet. "It is strange," he murmured. "These hammers were forged in light, but they endured the fires of darkness and did not yield. Perhaps that is our way also." Dwalin grunted, sharpening his axe with long, slow strokes. "You speak as though the fight is done, yet evil seldom dies cleanly. I saw the fire take Orin I, but I did not see him fall. There are tales of worse things that walked from flame unburned." Frar, who sat nearby binding a torn boot, lifted his gaze to the horizon. "If he lives," he said, "he will find no forge willing to serve him. The deep flame is quenched, and its breath is gone from this place. Whatever power he sought has turned to ash." Balin nodded, though the worry did not leave his face. "We have broken his hand, if not his spirit, but let us hope Mahal guards what remains beneath the earth." When the dawn of the 4th day came, they made ready to depart. The land around the Iron Hills lay silent, though the air still shimmered with the heat of buried fires. Their path would lead them westward once more, toward Erebor and the waiting king. Each dwarf carried one of the 9 hammers, save for 2, which had been lost beyond recovery within the molten depths. "It will be enough," said Balin as they began their slow climb. "The 9 shall not be forgotten again." Their road wound upward through the broken hills. The skies grew clearer with every mile, and by evening the first chill of autumn returned to the air. They camped among boulders, overlooking the wide plains that stretched toward Dale, and for the first time since the beginning of their quest, the stars shone without the red haze of forge smoke. Frar could not sleep. He sat apart, gazing into the night, the hammer of barley resting across his knees. He thought of the old smith's last words, the warning that Orin's life was bound to the deep flame. If the forge was truly destroyed, then Orin must surely be dead. Yet something in Frar's heart remained uneasy. The fire had roared like a living thing before it died, and he could still feel its heat upon his skin. "Can you not rest, lad?" came Balin's gentle voice. Frar shook his head. "It is too quiet," he said. "After so much noise, silence feels strange." Balin seated himself beside him, his gaze following the same dark horizon. The silence after battle is always the hardest. It is when you begin to hear your own thoughts again. "I keep thinking of Orin," Frar admitted. "He was our kin once. What drives a dwarf to such madness? Was it pride or sorrow or something else?" "Perhaps all of them," said Balin softly. "Our kind has ever loved the works of our hands, sometimes too greatly. It is easy to forget that the maker is not greater than the making. Orin's heart was strong, but it turned upon itself. He sought mastery where only reverence was due." Frar nodded slowly. "And the hammers? Do you think they are tainted?" Balin looked at the weapon in Frar's lap, the faint glimmer of runes along its haft. "No," he said. "Tools take the shape of the hands that wield them. They will serve the mountain again as they were meant to." A long silence passed between them. The wind stirred the ashes on the breeze, carrying with it the faint scent of iron. At dawn, they broke camp and continued westward. By midday, they had left the scorched hills behind and entered rolling country where grass once more grew green beneath the sun. They passed a ruined watchtower, half sunken in the earth, its stones blackened by age. A faint carving remained upon its gate, a crown above 7 stars, the mark of the old alliance between Dale and Erebor. "Strange," said Narvi, who had regained some of his old vigor. "This tower was lost in Smaug's time. I did not know it still stood." "It stands enough to mark the border of safety," said Dwalin. "We are nearly home." But even as he spoke, Frar halted, his eyes narrowing. He crouched beside the track they followed, studying the soil. "What is it?" asked Balin. "Tracks," Frar said. "Fresh ones, boots, not of dwarves. Men, perhaps 20. They came from the east and passed this way not a day past." Dwalin's hand went to his axe. "Easterlings. Or worse," murmured Balin. "If Orin's thralls scattered, some may yet linger. We cannot risk them reaching Dale." The company took cover among the rocks and waited. As the sun dipped low, they saw them at last, a band of dark-clad men moving cautiously through the vale. Their leader bore a helm marked with the same serpent and hammer sigil that Orin's servants had worn. "So," Dwalin growled, "the snake still coils." They fell upon the enemy as night fell, silent and swift. The first arrows flew before the Easterlings could raise a cry. Dwalin's axe split their ranks like a thunderclap, and Toli's hammer crushed helms with grim precision. Frar fought beside Balin, driving the foe back toward the stream that cut through the valley. When the last of the enemy fell, the dwarves stood amidst the quiet once more. The battle had been brief but fierce. Only one of the Easterlings still breathed, crawling upon the stones with blood upon his hands. Balin knelt beside him. "Who do you serve?" he demanded. The man's eyes rolled toward him, fever bright. "He lives," he whispered. "The fire took him, but it did not kill him. He walks in shadow now, beneath the earth." Then he was still. The dwarves looked upon one another, unease stirring anew. "By Durin's crown," Dwalin muttered, "will the flame never die?" "Perhaps it cannot," said Balin quietly. "Perhaps it only sleeps, as all dark things do." They buried the dead beneath cairns of stone and set off again before dawn. Their pace quickened. The road grew easier as they neared Dale's green plains, but the shadow of the words lingered. When at last the lonely mountain came into view, crowned with snow and sunlight, their hearts lifted. The gates of Erebor shone in the morning light, and the watchmen upon the walls gave a shout that carried across the valley. Home! King Dain received them in the great hall beneath the mountain. His face, lined with age and wisdom, softened as he beheld his returning kin. "Well met, my friends," he said. "You have gone into fire and shadow and returned. Tell me all." Balin bowed deeply. "The 9 are recovered, my lord, yet the 10th, Orin's creation, was destroyed in the flames that consumed him." Dain's eyes darkened. "And you are certain he perished?" Balin hesitated, glancing toward Frar. "As certain as we may be when darkness burns unseen." The king was silent for a time. Then he rose and placed a hand upon Frar's shoulder. "You have done the work of kings, son of Fundin. The hammer shall be sealed once more in the vault of Durin, and your name shall stand among their keepers." Frar bowed his head, though his thoughts were far away, beyond the mountain, beyond the plains, to the place where fire had fallen and whispers of movement stirred beneath the ash. For though the trail of the 9 hammers had ended, the shadow of their forging was not yet spent. Somewhere deep within the bones of the earth, A faint echo still lingered, the ring of a hammer striking once, then again, in the dark. Winter came early to Erebor that year. Snow fell upon the slopes of the lonely mountain, soft and silent, muffling the sound of hammers in the lower forges. The dwarves of Durin's line worked by the glow of their furnaces, their breath rising in plumes as they sang the old songs of craft and endurance. Yet beneath the music of the hammers, an unease lingered like a faint echo that would not die. The 9 hammers rested once more within the king's vault, locked behind gates of mithril and stone. Each had been polished, blessed, and laid upon an altar of granite. Yet even there, the light of their runes flickered strangely, pulsing as though they breathed. The priests of Mahal said it was but a trick of the firelight, but those who stood watch in the vault at night spoke in whispers of faint sounds, like distant strikes of metal deep beneath the mountain. Frar, now named Keeper of the Hammers, spent many nights alone within that chamber. He would walk among the 9 relics, tracing their runes with reverent hands. They gleamed cold and bright beneath the torchlight, yet whenever his fingers brushed the hammer that had belonged to Orin's betrayer, he felt a chill spread through his skin. "Rest now," he would whisper to them, as though the tools could hear. "Your work is ended." But the hammers never answered. One night, as the storm winds howled beyond the mountain gates, Balin came quietly into the vault. His white beard shimmered in the torchlight, and his eyes bore the weary look of one who had seen too many winters. "You keep vigil still?" he asked gently. Frar nodded. "I cannot rest while these lie here. Sometimes I think I hear them call to one another." Balin regarded him long, then said, "The crafts of our fathers hold deep secrets. Metal remembers, stone remembers. Perhaps the hammers speak in a language older than our kind. But do not let that voice rule you. You are their warden, not their servant." Frar smiled faintly. "I will remember." Yet when Balin had gone, he lingered, staring at the hammers. In the stillness, he thought he heard it again, a soft ringing, like the faint echo of Orin's forge. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his lids, he saw the red light of the deep flame and the shadow of a figure moving within it. A voice, distant and low, whispered his name. He started awake, his hand gripping the hilt of his dagger. The vault was silent. Only the torches crackled. Yet his heart pounded as though he had heard the voice in truth. The days that followed passed in uneasy quiet. King Dain, though strong in will, grew troubled by strange tidings. Messengers came from Dale and the Iron Hills, bearing word of quakes beneath the earth, tremors that split the ground and sent plumes of ash rising from forgotten places. The men of Dale spoke of lights flickering along the eastern horizon at night, like the reflection of fires burning underground. "Old wounds reopen," said Dain grimly when the council gathered. "Orin's forge has fallen, but the fire beneath it stirs still. If it wakes again, it may find new hands to wield it." Balin bowed his head. "Then we must act before the shadow grows." Frar stood beside them, his jaw set. "Send me, my lord. I will go east again and learn what truth lies in these reports. If the fire stirs, I will see it quenched with my own eyes." Dwalin, who had been silent until now, frowned deeply. "You have earned your rest, lad. Leave this to the younger hands." Frar shook his head. "There are none who know the path as I do. Orin's mark is burned upon my memory. If he walks again, I will be the one to find him." The king studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "So be it. You shall go, but not alone. Take 4 companions of your choosing. Bring word swiftly, for the snows deepen and the wilds grow dangerous." So it was that Frar set out once more from the gates of Erebor, with Narvi the mapmaker, Toli the stone hewer, Bruni the smith, and young Doran, son of Dwalin, eager yet untested in war. They rode east beneath the cold light of winter's moon, their cloaks drawn tight, their beards rimed with frost. Behind them the mountain glimmered like pale gold in the distance, fading as they descended into the wild lands. For many days they saw no sign of life, save for the flight of crows above the bare hills. The rivers were half frozen, the trees silent as tombs. Yet by the 5th night, as they made camp near the banks of the running river, Narvi came to Frar with worry in his eyes. "There are tracks beyond the ridge," he said. "Many feet, men perhaps, but not traders. Their prints are heavy, and their fires burn low, as though they wished not to be seen." Frar rose at once. "Easterlings?" Narvi nodded. "I think so. They march east toward the old forge lands." The others were roused, and before dawn they followed the trail. By midday they beheld a sight that chilled their hearts. A procession of dark-armored men, leading carts laden with ore and black stone. Among them walked figures, hooded and short, dwarves, or what had once been dwarves, their chains glinting in the weak light. "Orin's thralls," whispered Bruni. "I thought them dead." "Some survived," said Frar grimly, "and they serve the same fire still." From afar they watched the Easterlings vanish into a cleft between 2 ridges. Smoke rose faintly from that place, though no open flame could be seen. "We follow," Frar said, "but not by the road. There will be hidden paths through the stone." They found such a path by nightfall, a narrow tunnel that wound beneath the ridges like the burrow of some ancient beast. The air grew warmer as they descended, carrying the faint scent of brimstone. The walls were black with soot, and strange marks were carved upon them, crude imitations of dwarven runes. When at last they reached the tunnel's end, they found themselves upon a high ledge overlooking a wide cavern. Below, the Easterlings labored, stoking fires and setting up new forges upon the ruins of the old. At the center of their camp stood an altar of black stone, and upon it lay something wrapped in chain and cloth. A flicker of red light pulsed from within the wrappings. "The 10th hammer," Frar breathed. Balin had said it was destroyed, melted in the flames of the collapsing forge. Yet here, before their eyes, it gleamed again, half forged, half living, bound in iron, as though the earth itself could not contain it. As they watched, one of the hooded dwarves stepped forward and touched the chains. The light flared, and a voice echoed faintly through the cavern, a whisper like the sighing of embers. "Serve me," it said. "Forge anew." The Easterlings fell to their knees. The dwarves among them bowed low. Frar felt his stomach turn. The voice was Orin's. It could be no other. "By the Maker," murmured Narvi, "he lives." Frar's hand tightened upon the haft of his hammer. "No," he said quietly, "he endures, but he will not rise again." They withdrew into the shadows, their hearts grim and heavy. The task before them was clear. The 10th hammer had survived, and with it the spirit of the fallen smith. The deep flame was stirring once more, and if they failed to stop it, all the mountain realms would burn. So began the second journey of the 9 hammers, the journey not to seek what was lost, but to destroy what should never have endured. And as they prepared their weapons in the silent dark, the echo of distant forging rose once again, faint but unbroken from the depths of the earth. The darkness beneath the ridges pressed close around them, thick as breath in a sealed tomb. The heat that rolled from the caverns below was heavy with the stench of iron and fire. Yet the air carried also the sound of hammers striking in measured rhythm. It was a song of labor and pain, a song that Frar had heard before in the nightmares that followed him since the fall of Orin's forge. Now that rhythm had returned, slow and steady, beating like the heart of the mountain itself, they crouched upon the ledge overlooking the Easterling camp. Below, torches flickered, casting long shadows that wavered across the cavern walls. The men toiled like ants, hauling stones and feeding the furnaces. Among them moved the dark dwarves, Orin's old thralls, though many of them now bore signs of corruption, eyes that gleamed faintly red, veins darkened beneath the skin, hands blackened by the touch of fire that did not cool. At the center of it all lay the altar of black stone, where the 10th hammer pulsed faintly beneath its chains. It was larger than any tool wrought by dwarven craft, half weapon, half living flame. The wrappings that bound it glowed in rhythm with the sound of the forges, as though it beat in time with their fire. Frar watched it in grim silence. Beside him, Narvi whispered, "We should leave this place. It is cursed." Frar shook his head. "No. If we turn back now, the mountain will burn before spring's thaw. That thing must be destroyed while the fire that feeds it is still young." Doran, Dwalin's son, knelt at the edge, his eyes wide with both fear and awe. "How do we destroy a hammer forged of the deep flame itself?" "By sundering the flame again," said Frar. Barley spoke true. The forge and the flame are one. We must find the heart fire that feeds it and quench it before it takes shape. Bruni grunted. "Then we go below. But if we fail, we shall not climb out alive." "Then we do not fail," Frar said simply. They descended through a narrow fissure that wound down from the ledge. The rock was slick with moisture and ash, and more than once the youngest among them stumbled. But at last they reached a tunnel that opened upon the edge of the camp. The clang of metal was deafening now, echoing through the earth. When the guards passed, the dwarves slipped from shadow to shadow, moving unseen among the carts and forges. The Easterlings were too busy with their work to notice, their faces hollow with exhaustion, their eyes fixed on the burning altar. At the cavern's far end, Frar found a crevice that breathed faint heat. The stone around it shimmered faintly with a dull crimson glow. He crouched and placed his hand upon the rock. It trembled beneath his touch, pulsing with a slow, living rhythm. "This is it," he said, "the fire's root." Narvi unfurled his map by torchlight, tracing the lines. These tunnels linked to the old veins beneath Thralin's forge. The fire must run deep. If we strike it here, the whole cavern might collapse. "Good," said Frar. "If the mountain must fall to bury this evil, then so be it." Bruni and Toli began setting charges of black powder, their craft drawn from the miners of Erebor. The sacks were heavy, the fuses short. As they worked, the others kept watch. The guards moved nearer now, uneasy as though they sensed something stirring beyond their sight. When all was ready, Frar took one last look at the 10th hammer upon the altar. Its glow had brightened, and faint arcs of flame licked along the chains that bound it. The air thrummed with power. And then it happened. A voice spoke, not aloud, but within their minds, heavy and molten as the core of the world. You cannot unmake what is born of flame. The fires in the forges flared. The chains burst apart, and the hammer rose from the altar as though lifted by unseen hands. Its glow blazed white-hot, flooding the cavern with harsh light. The Easterlings cried out and fell to their knees, shielding their eyes. The voice came again, vast and terrible. I am the maker and the made. I am the hand that shapes the world. You cannot destroy me, children of stone. You can only serve me. Frar stood unmoving as the air burned around him. He saw within the light the shadow of a figure wreathed in flame. Orin's face, or what was left of it, stared back, eyes hollow, beard scorched, body bound by chains of living fire. The hammer floated before him like a crown of judgment. Your pride has no end, Orin, Frar said aloud. You were forged of the same stone as we, but you would make yourself a god. The shadow's mouth curled into a cruel smile. Then kneel, and I will make you greater than kings. Frar raised his hammer, the rune of Durin shining upon its head. I kneel to no flame. The works of our fathers were made in reverence, not in hunger for power. You are nothing but the echo of your own greed. With a roar that shook the stone, the apparition struck. Fire swept outward, melting iron and stone alike. The dwarves were thrown from their feet. Doran cried out as a beam collapsed beside him, and Bruni dragged him clear just as the roof began to fall. Frar stumbled toward the charges, his cloak aflame. Narvi, the fuses! Narvi's hands trembled, but he struck the spark. The flame raced along the line, hissing like a serpent. Orin's voice thundered through the cavern. Fools, you will drown. In the fire you awaken. Frar turned, his face lit by the blaze. Then let it drown with me. The explosion tore through the depths of the mountain. Stones split like glass. Rivers of molten rock surged upward, devouring the forges, the altars, the thralls. The light swallowed everything, red, white, and gold. When the roar faded, only silence remained. Frar awoke upon a slope of ash, half buried beneath the rubble. His beard was scorched, his armor cracked. Around him lay ruin, the valley once again. A crater of molten glass and shattered stone. The others were there too, battered but alive. Bruni coughed weakly, dragging himself upright. By the Maker's hand, he rasped. We live? Frar looked around. Aye, he said hoarsely, but the fire is gone. Indeed, the heat that once pulsed through the ground had vanished. The earth was still warm, but it no longer throbbed with the rhythm of the deep flame. The air was heavy with smoke and silence. Narvi staggered to his feet, clutching a blackened shard. Frar, he whispered, look! It was a fragment of the 10th hammer, cold, lifeless, and split through the middle. The runes upon it were dark. Frar took it in his hands. So ends Orin Blackhand, he said. Let this be the last time his forge is kindled. They buried the shard beneath a cairn of stone and sealed the passage with their own hammers. When the work was done, Frar stood for a long time in silence, watching the first snow fall upon the ruined valley. Will the fire ever rise again? Asked Doran quietly. Frar turned towards the west, where Erebor waited beneath the clouds. Perhaps, he said. The world changes, but shadow always seeks new hands. Yet as long as one dwarf remembers what was wrought here, it will never rule us again. They set their faces homeward. Behind them the wind stirred the ash, carrying with it the faintest sound, like a single strike of metal far below the earth. But it was only an echo, fading as they walked away, swallowed by the snow and the silence of the mountains. The journey home was long and bitter. Winter deepened with each passing day, turning the world to gray and white. Frost lay thick upon the ground, and the wind cut through cloaks and mail alike. The company of Frar, son of Fundin, moved slowly across the plains, their breath steaming before them, their hearts heavy yet unbroken. They had seen the fire quenched for the second time, and though the price had been great, hope flickered faintly in their weary souls. For many leagues they met no living soul. The wilds were silent save for the cry of distant crows and the whisper of snow against stone. The sun, when it appeared, was pale and cold, shedding no warmth. Still they pressed on, following the winding path that led westward to the lonely mountain. By the third week their food ran thin. They took to hunting what little game the winter yielded, hares thin as bone, and birds that perched unwisely close to their fire. Narvi kept their bearings by the stars when the clouds broke, while Doran learned to set traps from Toli, who grumbled endlessly, yet never failed to smile when the lad succeeded. Frar said little, his thoughts turned inward. The memory of Orin's last words, "I am the maker and the maid," haunted him still. Even in death, the traitor's voice clung like smoke to the back of his mind. At night he dreamed of fire running beneath the mountains, coiling like a serpent beneath the roots of the world. On the seventh night, after leaving the ruins, they reached the foothills east of Dale. The wind carried with it the faint scent of pine and wood smoke, and for the first time in many weeks, the horizon gleamed with something other than ruin. Beyond the ridge, nestled in the valley, the lights of Dale flickered like a sea of golden stars. "Home," Doran whispered, his voice hoarse with wonder. Frar smiled faintly. "Aye, the mountain waits for us." They descended under cover of night, wary of watchmen who might take them for strangers. The city gates stood open, for Dale was at peace and untroubled by war. The guards, recognizing the dwarves' garb, hailed them warmly and sent a runner to Erebor to announce their coming. By dawn they stood once more before the great gates of the mountain. The stone doors were rimed with frost, their carvings glinting beneath the morning sun. The guards saluted, their eyes wide with awe and disbelief, for word had spread that the company sent east had perished. Yet here they stood, scarred, weary, and fewer than before, but alive. Inside, the halls of Erebor glowed with golden firelight. The smell of forge smoke and stone dust filled the air, and the sound of hammers echoed faintly through the passages, a song of endurance that had never ceased. King Diain Ironfoot awaited them in the high hall, though age had bent his shoulders and silvered his beard. His gaze was as sharp as ever. He rose from his throne as Frar approached and spoke in a voice that carried through the vaulted chamber. "Welcome home, son of Fundin," said the king. "You have gone where few would dare, and you have returned with your kin beside you. Tell me, what fate befell the fire of the east?" Frar knelt and laid before him the blackened fragment of the 10th hammer. "It is ended, my lord. The deep flame is quenched, the forge is buried, Orin's spirit is gone, and his followers scattered to ash." Dian bent to regard the shard. Its surface was cracked, yet faint traces of its former power glimmered still, like embers dying in snow. He touched it lightly, then drew his hand back as though burned. "So the tale of the 9 hammers is closed," he said, "and yet—" His voice grew low. "Fire may sleep, but it is seldom slain. Did you feel it, Frar? The will that lingered?" Farrar hesitated, his mind turning to the moment of the forge's fall, the whisper in the flames, the shadow in the light. "Aye," he said softly, "it is gone from this world, I think, but not forgotten. Fire leaves memory behind, as all creation does. It waits perhaps until hands unwise stir it anew. Then we must ensure such hands never rise," Dain said. He turned to the gathered dwarves of the court. "Hear me, sons and daughters of Durin. Let it be known that the 9 hammers shall never again be borne by any living hand. They shall be sealed within the mountain's heart, guarded for all ages. The fire that made them is spent, and the craft that once raised our glory has too often courted our ruin." A murmur swept through the hall, but none spoke against the decree. The memory of Orin's betrayal was too fresh, the shadow of his forge too near. That night, by the light of 100 torches, the 9 hammers were borne in solemn procession through the halls of Erebor. Farrar led the way, robed in black and gold, the hammer of barley held across his arms. Behind him came Balin, Dwalin, and the smiths of the King's Guild. They descended into the deepest vault of the mountain, where no sound of wind or water could reach. There, before a great door of mithril, King Dain spoke the final words. "By Durin's name, and by the Maker's forge, let these hammers rest. May their strength serve only in memory, and may their fire never again wake unbidden." The doors closed with a thunderous echo, and the seal of the crown was set upon them. The torches were extinguished one by one, until only darkness and silence remained. When they returned to the upper halls, a strange peace filled the mountain. The forges burned steadily, and the song of labor resumed, softer now, but steady as a heartbeat. Life went on as it always had in the rhythm of stone and fire. In the days that followed, Farrar was honored with titles and gifts, yet none of these pleased him. He spent his hours in quiet labor, helping the smiths rebuild the halls that had fallen into disuse. Balin, seeing his unease, came to him one evening. "You have done a deed that will be sung for ages," he said, "yet you look as though you carry a burden still." Farrar smiled faintly. "Because I do. The fire may be gone from the east, but it sleeps in us still. The will to make, to shape, to conquer, we must guard it as fiercely as any treasure." Balin laid a hand on his shoulder. "Then you shall be the mountain's conscience, Farrar, son of Fundin. May your wisdom outlast your days." Years passed, and the snows melted, and spring returned to the lands around the lonely mountain. The grass grew green again over the scarred valleys, and trade with Dale and the Iron Hills flourished. Peace reigned under King Dain's hand. Yet in the deepest watches of night, when the wind blew through the hollow shafts of the mountain and the forges dimmed, some said they could hear it still, the faint ring of distant hammers echoing beneath the stone, a sound not of labor but of remembrance. And in his chamber far below, Farrar would sometimes pause in his work and lift his head, listening. Then he would smile, not in fear but in respect, and murmur softly, "Rest now, old fire. Rest and remember." For though the trail of the 9 hammers had ended, its story remained forever in the veins of the mountain, in every spark that leapt from the anvil, in every song sung beside the forge. The tale of flame and courage, of craft and ruin, had found its home in the heart of stone, where it would endure until the last light faded from Middle-earth. Many years passed in peace beneath the lonely mountain. The days of fear and fire faded into tale and song, and the dwarves of Erebor grew prosperous once more. The forges burned bright, but their flames were tamed, tempered by the lessons carved in loss and shadow. Yet though time dulled the sharpest memories, the story of the 9 hammers was not forgotten. It was told in whispers among apprentices, sung in low voices beside the forges, and etched into runes upon the king's gate. Frar, the keeper of the hammers, grew older but not weaker. His beard, once dark as iron, was streaked with silver, and the weight of years bowed his shoulders slightly. Yet his eyes remained keen and his heart unbroken. He spent his days in the lower halls, overseeing the teaching of young smiths, guiding their hands and tempers alike. Many sought his wisdom, for he spoke little but with purpose, and his words carried the weight of both fire and stone. But in quiet hours, when the forges dimmed and the mountain slept, Frar would descend alone to the vault where the 9 lay. He would sit before the sealed door, tracing the runes upon the mithril surface with his fingertips. There was comfort there, though also a sadness. Behind that door lay the relics of an age when dwarves had reached too far and paid dearly for it. Once, Balin found him thus and spoke gently. "You guard them as if they might stir again." Frar smiled faintly. "Not stir, perhaps, but they are like the old songs, Balin. Even in silence, they still breathe. The mountain remembers all things, and these remember too." Balin chuckled softly. "You have grown wise, my friend. Too wise for the likes of us who still swing our hammers without thought." "Better a hammer that strikes true," Frar said, "than one that waits forever to be lifted." It was in that same year that tidings came from the east once more. Traders from the Iron Hills brought word of strange quakes, tremors that rattled the deep mines, and of strange lights flickering along the edges of long-abandoned tunnels. Most dismissed it as the Earth's winter restlessness, but Frar listened with furrowed brow, his thoughts returning to the ruins of the Black Forge. That night, sleep would not come. He dreamed again of the deep flame, the molten sea that had consumed Orin and his works. But in his dream it was not quenched. It burned quietly beneath the stone, a sleeping heart, its rhythm faint yet steady. He heard a whisper, not loud as before, but patient and low. "You cannot unmake the fire, Frar, son of Fundin. It is the world's first breath and its last." He awoke in sweat, though the chamber was cold as the mountain's bones. The next morning he went to King Dain and told him what he had seen. The old king listened in silence, then said, "Dreams are but echoes of what we carry within. You have borne much. Let the earth heal itself. The mountain stands, and so do we." Frar bowed, yet unease lingered in his heart. In the months that followed, strange signs began to trouble the mountain once more. The furnaces in the lower forges burned hotter than before, even when damped. Veins of iron ran redder than any smith had seen, and ore pulled from the mines glowed faintly for hours after it cooled. The miners whispered that the fire beneath was stirring again. Dwalin's son, Doran, now a captain of the guard, brought these rumors to Frar. "The smiths grow fearful," he said. "They say the deep flame has woken beneath the roots of the mountain itself." Frar frowned. Superstition, yet superstition often begins as truth. That evening he descended to the deepest levels of Erebor, torch in hand. Few went so far now, for the old mining shafts had long since been sealed. Dust and cobwebs draped the tunnels, and the air smelled of age. But as he went deeper, the warmth grew unmistakable. The stone walls seemed to pulse faintly beneath his palm, as though a slow breath moved through the rock. he reached the last chamber, an ancient hollow that had once served as a smelter in the earliest days of Erebor's founding. There he stopped, for upon the floor lay a crack, narrow but deep, glowing with a dull red light. From it came a faint hum, steady as a heartbeat. Farrar knelt beside it, the light flickering upon his lined face. "So," he murmured, "you have found another path." He took from his belt the shard of the 10th hammer, the fragment that had been sealed away and kept under his care. For years it had lain dark, lifeless. Now as he held it over the fissure, the shard pulsed faintly with warmth. He closed his eyes and spoke softly into the dark. "I do not fear you. I have seen your end. The world may bear your flame, but it is we who shape it." The crack widened suddenly with a low groan, spilling a wave of hot air that snuffed his torch. The chamber plunged into red gloom, lit only by the light of the earth fire below. For a moment, Farrar thought he saw a figure in that glow, a shadow of Orin, perhaps, or something older still, its form shifting like molten metal. Then just as swiftly the light dimmed. The fissure sealed itself with a hiss, as though the mountain drew a long breath and closed its wound. Farrar stood alone in darkness, the shard cold once more in his hand. When he returned to the upper halls, he found Balin and Doran waiting. "The tremors?" Doran asked. "Ended," Farrar said. "For now, the fire has gone back to sleep." "And if it wakes again?" Balin asked quietly. Farrar's gaze turned toward the ceiling where the faint rumble of forges echoed through the stone. "Then we will greet it as we always have," he said, "with hammer and song and hearts that do not break." In the days that followed, the fires of Erebor burned steady and clean once more. The miners returned to their work, the smiths to their craft, and though whispers of the deep flame persisted, they were spoken less and less as the years rolled on. When Farrar grew too old to wield his hammer, he passed his duties to Doran, who became the new keeper of the hammers. Before stepping down, Farrar made one last journey into the vault of the Nine. The torches flickered along the mithril doors, and he laid his palm upon the cold metal. "Rest, old friends," he whispered. "We have earned our peace." Then he turned away and climbed the long stair to the surface. Outside, the wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and the distant laughter of dwarves at work. Above the mountain, the sun broke through the clouds, scattering gold across the snow. And in that light, Farrar smiled, for he knew the fire had not been conquered, but neither had it conquered them. It lived on, not in the forges of shadow, but in the hearts of those who labored for the joy of making, not the hunger for power. The deep flame still pulsed beneath the world, as it always had. Yet now, when it sang, its song was answered by the ringing of honest hammers, clear, strong, and steadfast as the mountains themselves. In the twilight of his years, when the beard upon his breast was white as new-forged silver, Farrar, son of Fundin, walked the quiet halls of Erebor and felt the weight of memory settle upon his heart like a mantle. The mountain had known peace for many winters. The songs of hammers rose each day and faded each night. Laughter echoed in the feast halls, and the forges glowed like stars in the belly of the earth. Yet the keeper of the hammers could not shake the feeling that all fires, no matter how gentle, must one day wane. He lived simply in a small chamber beside the lower forges, refusing the gilded quarters offered to him by the king. His hands, though scarred and knotted, still worked the metal with care. Apprentices came to learn from him, not the craft of arms, for that he seldom taught, but the patience that lay between each strike of the hammer. The true forge, he would tell them, is not the anvil or the fire, but the heart that commands them. Only a heart that endures may temper the world. It was on a winter's eve, when the snows lay deep upon the slopes of the lonely mountain, that a messenger came down from the high gates, breathless with haste. "A stranger approaches from the east," he said. "He bears no banner, but he carries a hammer bound in black cloth, and he asks for the keeper by name." At these words, Frar's blood ran cold. He took up his cloak, fastened the clasp of iron upon his shoulder, and made his way to the gate. The wind howled through the pass, carrying with it the sting of frozen ash. There, upon the threshold of the mountain, stood the stranger. He was tall for a dwarf, his cloak dark with frost, his face hidden beneath a hood. In his hands he held a long bundle wrapped in cloth that steamed faintly in the cold. Frar halted a few paces away. "Who are you, traveler, that you come unbidden to the halls of Durin's sons?" The stranger lifted his head, and though his beard was black as pitch, his eyes gleamed with a strange, weary fire. "A friend once," he said, "or what remains of one. I come from the ruins of the east." At his voice Frar's heart stirred, for though it was rougher and lower, he knew it well. "Durin?" he said in disbelief. "By the Maker, it cannot be. You were lost years ago beyond the Iron Hills." Durin bowed his head. "Lost I, but not to death. I followed a path I should have left untrodden. I sought to learn what power still lingered in the ruins we sealed. I thought the fire gone, but the fire remembered me." He unwrapped the bundle, and the cloth fell away. Within lay a hammer, smaller than those of the 9, yet wrought with terrible beauty. Its head was dark as obsidian, its runes red and shifting as though flame lived beneath their skin. Frar stepped back, horror and awe mingling in his gaze. "By the deep halls, what have you done?" "I did not forge it," said Durin, his voice trembling. "I found it. It was waiting in the ashes, whispering my name. I thought to bring it to you to lock it away, but it burns still. I cannot bear its weight any longer." Frar reached forward and grasped the hammer's haft. Pain flared through his hand, but he did not let go. The metal throbbed like a living thing, warm and hateful. He could feel within it the same pulse he had felt years ago beneath the stone, the heartbeat of the deep flame. "It lives," he said softly, "even now after all this time." Durin bowed his head. "Forgive me, master. I thought I could master it as our fathers mastered the old fire. But it sings to me in the dark. I fear what I may become." Frar took a long breath, steadying himself. "No dwarf may master what was born before the making of the mountains. But it is not your fault. The fire calls to all who listen too long." He turned to the guards. "Bring no one near this gate. Let none follow us." Together he and Durin carried the dark hammer down through the silent corridors of the mountain, past halls where the air was warm and filled with the scent of forge smoke, past the echoing chambers where songs of work and wine still rose faintly. At last they came to the deep vault, the door of mithril that sealed away the 9. Frar laid his palm against the cold metal. "It has been many years since I last stood here," he murmured. "Perhaps this is how the story must end." He turned to Durin. "When I open this door, you must not follow. Whatever happens beyond it, you will seal it behind me. Swear it." I will not leave you, Doran protested. You taught me the craft, the strength to stand. Frar gripped his shoulder, his voice fierce, though his hand trembled. Swear it, lad. The fire has tasted your name. It will not rest while you live. If you come after me, it will find you again. Tears welled in Doran's eyes, but he bowed his head. I swear it. Frar smiled, weary and proud. Then I go to the hammers one last time. He pressed the runes upon the door, and with a low groan, the mithril parted. A gust of warm air breathed forth, smelling faintly of coal and memory. Within lay the chamber of the Nine, silent and timeless. They rested upon their pedestals, gleaming faintly in the torchlight, as though they waited for the hands that once bore them. Frar stepped inside. The black hammer in his hand began to hum, the runes upon its head flaring red. He looked upon the relics of Durin's line and spoke quietly. I am sorry, my friends. I cannot let you wake again. Then he raised the dark hammer high and struck the stone. The sound rang through the chamber like thunder. The Nine blazed white for an instant, and the air filled with the smell of burning metal. Flame burst from the floor, wild and blinding. Doran, waiting beyond the threshold, cried out as the light spilled through the doorway. Then the door slammed shut. When the guards came at last, the vault was sealed and silent. Doran knelt before it, weeping, the edges of his cloak scorched. No sound came from within, and the mithril door glowed faintly with heat. For 3 days and nights the dwarves of Erebor labored to cool the door. When at last it opened, they found nothing within but stone blackened and cracked. The 9 hammers were gone, melted perhaps, or drawn into the heart of the mountain itself. Of Frar, there was no trace save a single mark upon the floor, the rune of his name scorched deep into the rock. King Dain stood long in silence before that mark, and when he spoke his voice was heavy with both sorrow and reverence. He has gone where none may follow, he said. He has sealed the fire at last. The vault was closed forever, its door walled with stone and iron, and none thereafter dared speak the names of the hammers aloud. Yet in the forges of Erebor, when the night grew deep and the flames burned low, the smiths would sometimes hear a faint rhythm rising from the depths, a single hammer striking in slow, steady time. Some said it was Frar himself laboring still beneath the mountain, keeping the fire bound by the strength of his will. Others said it was only the heart of the earth, beating as it always had. But the wise among them, those who had learned the tale in full, would smile softly and bow their heads, murmuring, so long as the mountain stands, his hammer shall strike, and the flame shall sleep. And thus ended the long road of the 9 hammers, and with it the tale of Frar, son of Fundin, keeper of the fire, last of the forgers. The world moved on as worlds must, but in the deep places of Middle-earth, the echo of his labor endured, patient, eternal, and unbroken as the mountain itself.